I'm Claudine Wong, joining you from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm joined now by Sam Sorbo, who is a actor, a radio show talk host. You've been an author. You are also a homeschooling mom. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the chance to have this conversation.
Well, it's interesting because we are all learning many new skills in this coronavirus pandemic, some that we have always been wanting to try, and some that we maybe are forced into trying, but are learning a lot from that. And homeschooling is one of those things I hear from a lot of parents who say, this is not what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be this involved, but they are also seeing some benefits from it. You describe yourself as a self-doubter to now a really big advocate of homeschooling. Why didn't you want to start homeschooling your three children?
I felt completely incompetent. I felt completely inadequate. And so I doubted myself. I doubted my abilities. And I say to people, the reason that they doubt themselves is because they've been taught to doubt themselves. They've been taught that you're not capable of doing anything that you haven't been formally instructed on by a teacher at a blackboard or a whiteboard or what, right? You
Yes.
never got the gold star, and you never passed that exam on how to educate your children.
Well, and
And
you don't want to mess up. You don't want to do a disservice to these children that you want to make sure that they enter the world in the most prepared way they possibly can. I always felt like I don't know if I'm a good teacher. And so I really have a lot of respect for the people who have gone to school and who, know how to explain a concept that sometimes still confuses me. I mean, give me a math class and I'm a little lost. So after a certain grade.
well, that's not to say, and I love teachers, and for the most part, they're really trying to work in a system that's compromised. So you say, well, maybe you'll mess it up. Well, the schools really aren't succeeding to any great degree. We're 27th in the world for education, and we spend more than most every other country per student in the United States. And if you look at the outcome of college these days, we have basically a generation that's living in their parents' basements because they can't hold a job, or they can't find a job, or the opportunities aren't available to them. And, we just left, now we're coronavirus time, but we just left nearly full employment. So why do we have this disconnect? And I think that there's a disconnect between reality and what the education system is offering. So we have parents who graduated high school, but they feel incompetent to teaching a third grader. It's not rocket science. It's third grade math and third grade reading. And so why you would feel incompetent, the proof of an education is the ability to impart that knowledge. And yet we have parents who are like, well, I don't know what to do.
Well, you have this partnership now that actually helps because guidelines are helpful in any.
Oh,
We cook, we follow a recipe. If you give people tools, and I think that's the idea, right, behind this partnership that you have. I'm going to pull up this page so people can see it, but
and I love, look at the yellow. Don't worry, you've got this, because we recognize that so many parents feel just completely inept, like they're a fish out of water, and they're wondering how they're going to get this done. And so we are partnering basically with you, and we're offering this resource absolutely for free. And it's basically lesson plans for every day. And so you'll get the lesson plan delivered to your email. We'll come alongside you. We offer tips and tricks and games to play with your kids. And I was just asked, because now parents are saying, hey, so the school sent me all my curriculum, except that the kid's done in an hour and a half or 2 hours. What am I supposed to do with him the rest of the day? Well, school doesn't take the whole day. I mean, education doesn't take the whole day. School does.
Yes.
But don't try to recreate school at home. That's not what a home education is. It's simply education done. It's like a DIY for education. And the fabulous thing here is, if your kid finishes all their work, then they can pursue the things that really interest them, the things that really intrigue them. And maybe that's spending more time playing piano, or maybe it's discovering more about the stars than they would ever have time to in school.
I will say that I have learned that we have more time to do some things that we have said. And when you're not running around, crazy, then it does allow you to take a breath. I mean, what are your best tips? How long have you been homeschooling your children?
Just over a decade.
So that long enough though. How long did it take you to feel comfortable?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And that's good for people to know, right? Because if after a week of this, they're like, I'm following the lesson plans and I'm still overwhelmed, it's
I'll
not.
tell you, I'll tell you, and allow me a shameless plug. This is my book, They're Your Kids, An Inspirational Journey from Self-Doubt to Homeschool.
I'll let you hold that up one more time when we're not sharing the screen so that it's a little bit bigger for people to see. Yes, this
So
book.
it's available on my website. So samsorbo.com. And I go into the story in my book because I pulled my second grader out to homeschool third grade. And I said to my husband, I just want to try it for the fall. Like I really didn't know, but here's what happened. In second grade, he was so underserved. I said to Kevin, I think I could fail and still get a better result than by putting him back in the system next year. And so we tried it. And I'll tell you, about a year after that, we loved it. We just loved it because you travel, you're free because you're guiding everything. You're free in a sense. Yeah, there's a little bit of work that's involved, but I skipped the drop-off lines, I skipped the pickup lines, I skipped the parent-teacher meetings, I skipped a bunch of stuff. So to me, it was a great trade.
Did you
because
one
I
out?
had autonomy.
Did you have 3 kids? Did you do it for all 3 of them, or did you do one at a time?
No, I did all 3.
All 3 at one time. You just said, we're going to do this. We're going to do all of this.
That first year we were in, but a year later, I put him back in a little private school because I still felt completely inept. And I was like doing the best I could, but I felt like I was failing them. And the fact is I was not failing them. I just had these weird expectations that I think are engendered by the public schools because I went to public school. So I guess that's where I got my ideas from. And so it took me about 6 weeks and I pulled him back out. That story's in the book. It didn't end well. Like it was kind of a disaster on at least on one level. And so I would say to parents, because it's such a good question and nobody has asked me that. I've been doing 70 plus interviews and no one has asked me how long it took me to sort of get settled in it. And it was after that experience that I realized, you know what, I am enough. And what I'm lacking, I will find out for my child. So I really want to encourage parents, take a DIY attitude towards this. I mean, you're in it anyway. You're stuck.
You're in it. Well, I think now the point is that you can try it. You have to try it. You have to be in this somewhere. You're learning how to do online distance learning from all these schools. And so you can learn these other skills in terms of, trying to figure out, is this something that you feel comfortable with doing? And is this something that maybe in the long term that you never considered that you would consider? Whether or not you end up doing that in the long term, it's at least something that you've at least gave a test run to and gave it a shot.
Choices, right? As Americans, we like to have options. We like our choices. And so why are we thinking one size fits all education is going to work for our child? So just take a step back. You're stuck. You have to do it anyway. Go to coronavirushomeschooling.com and get our lesson plans. Compare them to the lesson plans that the schools are coming home with or sending home for you, and take a look and do a contrast and compare. Kick the tires on home education. See what it feels like. See how it feels. I'm getting emails daily now from parents who say, you know what, it's easier than I thought it was going to be, and I'm here to tell you it's more rewarding than you could ever imagine.
Did it fit each one of your kids in the same time frame, or did one child say, you know what, I love this, the other one said, I want to go back to school, or the other one, how long? Because I think a lot of parents taking out their children would have children resistant as well. Some of them love it, some of them hate it, some of them would be like, sign me up tomorrow. But kids are different too, just like parents are different in terms of, I think, how they are able to execute any plan they're given. Kids also in what they want and the environment that best suits them.
So there are a couple answers to that. One is, as the parent, I'm running the show. And so the first thing that I did with my kids when I decided I was going to home educate them is I convinced them that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So if you're a parent who's considering it, start working on your children early and say, if you, like I would pick up my kids from school and I'd say, if you were homeschooled, you'd be done with your work by now, but do you have homework today? And they do. Which is absurd. Why do children have homework? They're in school for 8 hours. I mean, 7.5 hours, whatever it is, right?
That's a whole nother debate, the homework
So,
issue, which actually
so
has been a little
right.
solved, I think, by this
But
whole.
I'm saying, let's take out the facts and really consider them and try to form, we go on rote. We're just on sort of a remote control. My parents put me in school, therefore I put my kids in school. And I'm trying to wake people up and say, there are other options out there. And by the way, home education looks a whole different, like for different families. There are so many different ways to get it done. So you could say, you know what? For the price of my private school, I can hire a retired school teacher, and I can be in charge of the curriculum for my children. And I know people who have done that, and they save money, and their children go on to Harvard or whatever. Like crazy stories that you just don't think. I had a guy say to me, his son was failing, so he took the year and he shifted his shifts to night shift. He works night shifts so he could educate his kid in the mornings. Yeah, it was a grueling schedule, but he got it done and brought the child up to date. When you pour into a child, you get returns. And in fact, the statistics prove it. So homeschooled children, 15 to 30% higher on scholastic aptitude tests. And the number one determinant for a child's performance academically is parental involvement. So here you have the opportunity to see, can you make a difference in your child's life?
Sam, do you think there's enough? I mean, obviously, if you want to, if we want to analyze the public school system, there's going to be a lot of places where people say this needs to be looked at better. This needs to be looked at better. Yes, you have good teachers, but maybe there's more accountability, or maybe there's not enough funding. And there are a lot of ways that you can analyze that. In the homeschooling world, do you think that there is improvement that needs to be made? Whether it's, I mean, you guys have this website that kind of gives guidelines, but more oversight or more help or more, things in place to make sure that the kids who are being homeschooled have, I mean, these success stories are fantastic, but are there kids who also maybe slip through the cracks, who aren't doing as much as maybe they need, or getting their needs met as well in the homeschooling universe?
Well, I'm a traditionalist. This country was founded on unique individuality of the individual sovereign over their own life. And so my response to that is, well, we have all of those stopgaps in place in our education system, and we're still graduating children who can't read. So I don't think that there is a one size fits all, you must pass this test or that test. I mean, Bill Gates did not graduate college, neither did Steve Jobs or Richard Branson. So, we're trying to apply some kind of metric that patently doesn't function. And I would say that rather than put in metrics and try to have children respond as if they were somehow widgets that fit into certain compartments, I would laud the individuality of each individual. And yeah, there are better parents, and there are bad, great parents and bad parents, and good home educators and mediocre ones, of course. But that's because we're all individuals, and that happens on the school level too. There are great teachers, there are bad teachers. Most teachers are just trying to get done what the system requires of them. And I'm saying we need to take a moment and look at the system and re-examine how functioning the system is, because if you turn out somebody who doesn't know how to teach what they've learned because they really haven't learned, like, you got to rethink it.
Yeah,
we just have to rethink it.
Well, let's go back to this website, because you've got some steps on there, right? So the first one is kind of what we just talked about. Right. Take a deep breath, and I think reimagining the way that we imagine, it has to be, is probably the first part, right?
Well, I mean, doing these interviews, people say, well, can we have a photo of you homeschooling your children? And I don't have one, because, yeah, okay, we did start every day at the kitchen table, but that was just us starting the day at the kitchen table. Mm-hmm. School doesn't look like school at home. And I know that there's that image of, okay, everybody's sitting around the kitchen table and they're all working, because that's the image that we have of school. But education doesn't necessarily look like school. In fact, there's a really popular video on TED Talks of a 13-year-old physicist who says that he hacks his education. He goes on YouTube and he learns what he wants to learn. And now with the internet, and certainly with the advent of all of what we're doing right now with coronavirus, we've put this on like hyperspeed to get into the 21st century, like welcome aboard into the technological revolution.
Well, it's amazing what we can do with technology.
Right.
right?
And
For the
and
help we
so,
get.
you can have your kids, you can hack their education, you can figure it out, because everything, there's so much that's available online. I mean, if you go back 30 years, the home educators were like scrounging around for books,
Yeah.
basically. Like, where am I going to get more books for my kids? And
But
now,
yeah, absolutely. But step two is what you're saying is you can hack it. You can also, and this is what, sign up for support. So there are places that you can go, and I know people who have homeschooled, and and there are groups and places, and that's important to remember too, that if you're overwhelmed, you can get some help setting this up. You don't have to start from scratch.
in fact, I tell new homeschoolers, please join a co-op, join a
Mhm.
homeschool group, join with people who can lead you. And by the way, homeschoolers are super friendly. We love to grow our ranks. We're so happy to welcome people into the community, because we think it's the best thing since sliced bread. And one of the things that is completely discounted, because everybody's talking about education, is the relationship that you have with your child or children. And you can't sort of put a value on that, but the relationship that you have with your children is typically is strengthened in the home education environment.
Yeah. So share the experience. That's what you just said, and really, there is strength in numbers, I guess, in that sense, and in most things, right? That if you share your experience and you get some information from the people who are doing it, it can broaden your experience as well.
Well, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. How did you teach math? I taught it this way. Well, let me try that. Oh, that didn't work for my son. Let me ask somebody else. And then you
Yep.
work off of that. And yeah, it might seem like it's extra work, but frankly, trying to get through Common Core math with your sixth grader, good luck with that. I
Yes.
don't know why the public schools decided to change the standard algorithm. Math worked for many years, decades, actually, centuries, before they decided to change it without even testing it before they implemented it.
Well,
So
that did make many parents just crazy. What are those were the do's that we just went over. What are the don'ts? What are
with
the
home
Yep,
education,
yes. I mean, are there
uh,
some things that, I mean, I think the self-doubt is a big one, but what are there some things that, you don't have to stay at the kitchen table. You don't have to do those things, but maybe these are the things that sometimes lead to it being harder.
yeah, one thing is, well, certainly don't try to recreate school at home. And if you hit a stopping block, I tell parents, if you're hitting a stopping block where people are getting frustrated, walk away. You have absolute privilege to say, you know what, this is just too challenging right now. Push it away. Don't you have projects yourself that you have to get done, and you put them off because just not right now? And then when you're ready, you take them on and you go, yeah, and then you get them done. We have that. The kids have that also. So allow that flexibility. And that, I mean, that's part of the beauty of home education, is you have that flexibility. The other thing I want to tell parents is you can visit museums even during Corona. There are a lot of museums that have a lot of their resources that are available online. So there's a lot that you can do towards your child's education that may not look like your standard education. I mean, I've got questions about the way that we run so-called curriculum. So as you know, we kind of bifurcate the curriculum. So you're either math and science, or your language and humanities and social studies, right? But the fact is that math, and I know you brought up math earlier, math is a foreign language. It's a language just like French or Greek.
Mm.
But we don't teach it like that. We teach it as if it's this separate thing. And the beauty about math is math also is the language of logic. And we ought to be better at teaching math. So here's a chance for parents to reinvent education for their children, and literally to set their children free. Imagine that you are hostage to your feeling of inadequacy, that you can't actually relate to your child because you don't know how to teach them. And I'm saying, not only can you learn very quickly how to teach them and what to teach them, because you're smarter than you think you are,
Hmm.
because you did graduate high school,
Yes.
right? You're smarter than you think you are. But you can grow from that and really enable your child with a world of opportunity that would otherwise probably not appear open to them.
So your kids, you started them when they were 8, 6, and 4. Is that about
Yeah, that's about
That's about
right.
right? would you say for parents who, I know people who said, okay, I'm going to homeschool my child through middle school. They've had, everyone has a different philosophy, right? They did elementary school. They were like, I don't want to do this in middle school. So they homeschooled in middle school. They said, but I want to get them back into high school sports and socialization of high school. So I'm going to throw them back into public school or private school when they go back to high school, or some who do the whole shebang. Is there an ideal age that if you could go back and say, okay, I'm going to start this at the ideal time, would you have started it at kindergarten age or, or earlier preschool age or whatever, and started it from the very beginning? Would you have waited? I mean, is there an ideal age or grade?
Okay, so for me personally, I think preschool that's more than just play school is an abomination. I don't think children ought to be away from their parents for very long. So a couple days a week of a half-day preschool, okay, that's babysitting. I get it. But in terms of the ideal time to start home educating, you've started it. You teach your child how to tie his shoes. You teach him how to eat with a knife and fork, or you teach her how to to get dressed or go potty in the pot, right? You're teaching your child right from the get-go. And then all of a sudden, you're incompetent when they reach the age of 6 or 5 or what have you? No. So to me, it's an ongoing thing. And that's actually the relationship that I have with my children. And I mean, I remember when my daughter decided she really liked doing art. She was very young, but she started drawing, and I know nothing about art. And so all I did was encourage her. And she started going on YouTube and looking up how to draw hands or how to draw feet, and she's actually self-teaching herself art. And all I did was encourage her. And I said, if you really want to do art, you should put in 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day. That's when she was really young. And boy, did she buckle down and do that, because that was what was interesting to her. And I think it's important that we recognize the unique individuality of everybody. Yep. And we don't try to shove them into a class schedule with specific books and a specific time. No, now's the time for math. Well, what if you don't actually feel like doing math right then? No, you have to do it. I think that's very limiting, and it actually curtails learning. In fact, it makes learning more challenging and less pleasurable, which is why probably by the time I graduated high school, I hated it.
Well, I mean, it is hard. Growing up is hard. Being a kid, I think, is tough. And I think if you ask a lot of people about high school experiences in general, it's a tough thing.
But I will say that if you choose to home educate, don't make a 5-year plan. Don't make a 10-year plan. Just make a plan for the next semester. Yep. Give it a shot this fall. So you know what? Let's give it a shot. What do you have to lose? Your child. I mean, seriously, your kid could probably take a year off from school and not lose that much, depending on the child, because they repeat year after year. So I'm just
people say to you, it didn't work for me. I don't like it. I mean, do you say to them it doesn't work for everybody, or do you believe that it can work for everybody?
I think it ought to work for everybody, because I think that it is really part and parcel of of what defines us as Americans, is that we are individuals. And therefore, I think the system that treats us as if we were not individuals is a challenge, right? But I don't second guess people when they say, oh, I tried that, it didn't work for me. I'm sad. I have parents say to me, well, I don't have the patience. And, the opposite of patience is anger. And so I think, wow, that's too bad that they have such anger management issues, that they don't have patience for their own children. I had a school teacher say to me once, she was a 3rd grade teacher. She said, I could never homeschool my children. I would kill them by Wednesday. And I was like, wow, do the parents of the kids you teach know that you talk that way about your own children? Like I get that people are struggling, but it's through the struggle, it's through the challenges and overcoming them that we become greater than we ever dreamed. And so my message is to empower parents to try this, to try it on. And if it's not a fit for you, then I get it. I can't convince you any more than what I've tried to do, right? But I really encourage people to try it for a few months, try it till Christmas, maybe try it again. Look, and I went back a year and a half after I started, put my kids back in school. I thought, this isn't working. And then I realized again, no, it's working. I just have a weird metric. And it's hard for us because our metric is informed by our school experience. And so I would just say, have a look at the, re-examine the metric that you're using.
Yep.
Because it might not be, yeah.
If we had asked you, 20 years ago before you were a mom and predicted that you would be holding a website, doing interviews on homeschooling, being this advocate, what would you have said?
You're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. But I will tell you, I wouldn't have done half the things that I've done since I started homeschooling if I hadn't chosen to home educate, because home education is as much about educating the parent as it is about educating the child, frankly.
Well,
it's an odd sort of a thing, and you just don't know what you're missing. I say this, parents don't know what they're sacrificing when they drop their kids off at the school gates. They can't possibly know. And it's sad because they're just convinced that that's the thing to do, and so they do it. But now we have really a national call to reconsider.
well, you have a choice now, and even if you didn't want the choice,
Right.
you're definitely exploring the different ways because you want your children to be successful, whether they are homeschooled or in public school or private school, whatever form of education that you pick. And certainly, I know a lot of people who are reimagining their school days and their days and how their lives are going, and we wonder in all of this, when we all go back to quote unquote normal in terms of the world as we used to know it, how we'll go back differently, whether it's telemedicine, telecommuting, all the different industries where we didn't even imagine they could do it from home, like we are doing it from home.
That's right.
Now I think it definitely will give us more options and more ways to reimagine the world around us and the world for our children.
Yeah, it certainly will. There's no doubt about that. And so this is just one of those opportunities. Look, there's a silver lining in every cloud, right? I firmly believe that, but you might have to look a little bit hard to find it. And so as challenging as this is, if you work a little bit at it, I think you might find it more rewarding than you imagine.
Absolutely. All right, Sam Sorbo, I appreciate the conversation so much. It's so interesting, and certainly something that I think parents are all going to be benefiting from now as we look to help our kids and live in this new world that we're in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.